It's the key.
80 is kind of the rule of thumb anyway for us finance geeks to, talk about that. Yes, sir.
You've already answered the one about 80%. Yeah, I have about 2 or 3, but you don't have to belabor any of them. The state minimum requirements for graduation, and it has to be certain level, so it's going to cost you X number of dollars. When that money comes down, what happens when the state, when it has to be a minimum, and we no longer have any money? That's one. Are there any changes from Governor Kasich underneath the table? And can the state auditor run out of money?
Whoosh. Let me try to address those one at a time. First question had to do with the operating standards. And there are operating standards that have been approved. And your district, like all the other 613 districts in the state of Ohio, has a charter with the State Board of Education. Part of that charter maintains that you as a school district will meet those minimum operating standards. The operating standards, for example, 25-to-1 student-teacher ratio, average K through 12. Operating standards are you need 20 credits for graduation from high school. Now, what happens if a district doesn't meet those? Well, you're not allowed to not meet them, basically. If you don't meet them, in essence, the State Board of Education has authority and responsibility of revoking your charter. What does that mean? It means that you don't have a school anymore. And that again has never happened because, we do have another group at ODE that kind of looks into that. But what will happen is while you're still maintaining those, you still have to pay for that. As you suggest, it does cost money to put those operating standards into place. The district still has to pay for it, and that's where you run into a deficit mode. That is where you run into the deficit because you're spending more money to make sure that those operating standards are there. Now, does every school do things above and beyond the minimum standards? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I don't know where you're at. A lot of districts offer 2 or 3 foreign language offerings, for example, in high school. One is the minimum standard that every student has to have, I think, 2 years of foreign language. So if you're offering 2 or 3 and a district is looking for reductions, that's going to be one of the areas that they're going to look at. Anything that is not mandated or not required by the operating standards. A lot of people ask me about extracurriculars. Are they mandated by the state of Ohio? No, they are not. Are they good for kids? Absolutely. Do they increase students into your district sometimes? Yes, they do. If you have a good basketball team, you get a lot of kids coming in, wanting to come here. But it's not required, and that's the reason a lot of districts go to pay to participate, because they are not, if they're running out of money, if their general fund is running low, they have to increase revenue or decrease expenditures, right? So that is one way that a lot of districts will increase revenue, is by putting a pay to participate in. We have one school district that's in emergency now that is charging $650 per student per sport. And because since they're in emergency, they have to make sure that that is revenue neutral to maintain it. Revenue neutral means that it has to pay for itself, either through the gate receipts, through pay to participate, etc. Now, some other parts, what is Governor Kasich doing? I don't know. We will find out sometime around March 15th, in about a month. We will find out what his budget is, what his plan is, and as you probably have all heard, there's about an $8 billion or so hole in the state's budget. The state is almost in financial emergency, so to speak. But what are they going to do? They're going to make reductions. They say they're not going to raise taxes, so they're not going to increase their revenue. So I don't know what that means, but by March 15th we should find out an answer to that. And since both houses, the House and the Senate, are both Republican, whatever he presents on March 15th most likely will be very, very close to what the law is come June 30th. And the final question that he made was, will the auditor state ever run out of money? I've never seen that happen. I know that all of us in state agents, all the state agencies in the state of Ohio, have made numerous reductions over the course of the last several years. I know the Auditor of States has, I know the Department of Education has, we are down to, if you can believe this, right around 500 members in the Department of Ed. Probably when I joined it 5 or 6 years ago, it was closer to over 700. So a lot of reductions have been made in the statewide. We have 10 days a year we don't get paid for it. So that's cost savings days. So there's a lot of things that go on in state government that are happening as well too. I hope I answered all, addressed.
With next year, everybody has to borrow. It's in that red right there. That has never occurred before, has it?
Again, that was 2 years out. Keep that in mind. So right now, they don't have to borrow for 2 years out. We're just concerned right now. The 10 districts that are in red this year, we have worked with them. A lot of them have made reductions already through the year. Some of them have already had a levy approved. Again, this was from October. And what happens first week of November is you have your election. So any election result may not be in that one, may not be covered here. Does that make sense? But, you know, most districts will be able to address those. If not, we've already put 2 of them, I know, in the fiscal caution, one yesterday, and I've got another letter going out. I'm calling to a superintendent tomorrow to talk to him about fiscal caution. So we try to stay on top of those things the best we can to make sure that, because the law does require that every district finish the year with a positive balance. It requires that they finish the year with a positive balance, and they're not allowed to borrow money over the course of the 1 year to the next. Now, there's one exception to that. If you have a new levy, a levy that is approved, a district can get a 5-year tax anticipation note on that to help them out, but then they pay it back over 5 years. But again, what a lot of districts will do, will get an advance of from their county auditor to make sure that they finish the year with a positive balance. But if you get an advance from your auditor, what you're doing is spending next year's money on this year's bills. And most of you understand home budgets. If you do that very often, you're going to be in quite a bit of serious trouble there eventually. Thank you for your questions. Anything else I can confuse you about? Yes, sir.
After looking at our situation, talking with Neil, considering operating standards, can we eliminate enough staff to balance our budget?
The question is, in essence, can you make enough reductions to balance the budget? And I don't know that because I'm not that familiar with your staffing per se at this point. Staffing analysis is something that can be done too.
We've had a staffing analysis done, and the analysis showed that we are right at a hair above or a hair below of what we need to be. So it's really, we're not overstaffed in any particular area. That the staffing assessment also, when that was done, if I'm not mistaken, was done prior to the most recent reductions that we just did this past January as well.
So the bottom line is, what I hear you saying is, to reduce another $1.1 million would be very, very difficult. It would be difficult to the point that your numbers of your classroom, of your students in each classroom would go up. In other words, you can go up to 25-1. Keep that in mind, district-wide. But sometimes you'll see this elementary and middle school students with 30, 32 students to a classroom. And if you're an elementary parent, that's the last thing you probably want to hear. So in most cases, it is a combination of both, increasing the revenue, either through a tax levy of some sort, and making the reductions that you can make that are not mandated for the operating standards to get by. That's what the majority of districts will do. Good question, though. Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to add to what Mr. Kaputa said about the staffing analysis, that you guys are right about where you need to be. And I audit local schools, and I also would say that the salary levels here are mediocre, so it's not like anybody's being overpaid either. So I think the constituents need to understand that. You hear a lot of people say the staffing is overpaid, but in reality, when you compare it to other districts of the same size, it's not the case.
Okay, we have an auditor in our midst.